Hey, Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I don't know if you've heard, but Mint's premium wireless is $15 a month. But I'd like to offer one other perk. We have no stores. That means no small talk. Crazy weather we're having. No, it's not. It's just weather. It is an introvert's dream. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
If your eyes are the windows to your soul and your glasses are the windows to your eyes, then it's pretty important to find your perfect frames. That's why at Warby Parker, we've made shopping for eyewear as easy and fun as can be. Peruse endless styles in our stores or use our app to virtually try on frames and get personalized recommendations. To find your next favorite pair of glasses, sunglasses, or contact lenses, or to locate your nearest Warby Parker store, head over to warbyparker.com. That's warbyparker.com.
Welcome again to the Explaining History podcast. I'm delighted today to be joined by journalist Paul Vallely, whose new book, Live Aid, The Definitive 40-Year Story from Pop and Poverty to Politics and Power, is a kind of a history, but also a kind of, seen from Paul's own experience, a kind of a journey from the concert of Live Aid in 1985, which was organized by Bob Geldof to bring urgent relief to the famine in Ethiopia, all the way through a 40-year sweep through I suppose, the politics of aid and development and debt and activism that has shaped really a huge part of kind of public consciousness since then. So firstly, Paul, welcome. It's a delight to have you on the podcast today.
Oh, it's nice to be here.
Paul, your involvement with this goes all the way back to the kind of the initial reporting of the famine in Ethiopia, which I believe would have been 1984. Is that correct?
Yeah, 1984, 1985, there was a terrible famine in Ethiopia in which it's estimated 1 million people died, and many millions more were at risk of starvation. And I was the Times correspondent in Ethiopia, and I was filing back daily reports about the terrible situation. What I didn't know at that point was that one of the people who was reading my reports was Bob Geldof. And when he saw the terrible broadcast by Michael Burke on the BBC, which sparked the whole movement, as it were, the nation was shocked and the world was shocked to see these pictures of starving children, and on such a huge scale. In the bit of Ethiopia where it was filmed was a vast plain, and you could see just thousands, tens of thousands of people sitting in this plain, basically starving to death, waiting for food that never came. And when when Geldof saw this on the television, he was seized with the idea that he had to do something about it. And so he got his mates together in Band Aid, and they recorded this charity single for the starving people. It took off with extraordinary, a kind of momentum that nobody could have anticipated, because everybody had seen this footage. Everybody felt there must be something we can do. But beyond sending 10 quid to Oxfam or Save the Children, people didn't know. They had this urge to kind of do more, but they didn't know what it was. Mm-hmm. And when Geldof started the record, did the record, everybody involved in it felt this was their chance to make their personal contribution. So the record company, even the lawyers on the record company, gave their services for free. The shops didn't take any profits from selling it. When it was pressed, the vinyl was donated by ICI. The pressing was done by factories without charge. The ladies who stuck the labels on the records worked overtime and didn't get paid for it. The men who drove the lorries to deliver it to the shops all were done. It was all done without pay. And this whole ethos of this Band Aid movement began, in which it kind of empowered people to feel that they could make a difference in a world in which they felt powerless, and they felt that the world was it was impossible for them to deal with. But this was some little thing that they could do in their own lives, and it planted a seed which altered the psyche of not just one generation, but 2 or 3 generations.
Because this comes at a time where activism around things like apartheid was a kind of a key feature of kind of popular culture in the 1980s. You have people like kind of Kate Bush and Peter Gabriel, and Sting, Paul Simon, a variety of other people deeply committed to that cause. And so in
the case of Paul Simon, of course, he got into trouble because he went to South Africa and he made the record Graceland, and a lot of the other artists thought he'd kind of crossed the line into kind of on the dark side. And but Geldof was involved in anti-apartheid movement much earlier than that. When he was a boy, his mum died when he was 6, and his dad was a traveling salesman, so he was left on his own for a lot of the time. He had a couple of big sisters, but they were kind of, busy with their own lives. And so he became very self-sufficient. One of the things that he did, he realized, he had to get the shopping in, he had to get the coal in, he had to, if he didn't organize it, it didn't happen. I think which shaped his attitude to life. If he didn't organize it, it didn't happen. And he got involved with the anti-apartheid movement in Dublin and a campaign to stop the South African rugby team playing in Dublin. And he was on a demonstration. He got hit on the head by a police baton, and he still got the scar, if you see it on his head there. So right from very early on, Geldof was a kind of political activist.
And you're right in saying with the Band Aid record, and then with Live Aid afterwards, that and I think it's got to do with things to do with globalization, televisation of things, the fact that you have Phil Collins going on Concord to play in both gigs, and the kind of the joining together of a TV audience to focus on a particular aspect of this kind of atrocious, terrible disaster. I mean, the extent to which the audience at the time understood about the politics of aid and debt and the things and the arms industry and the things that kind of the big structural things that are fueling crises in Africa. I think we've all learned an awful lot about that subsequently. But
Geldof learned a lot about that subsequently. But as you say, at the time, it was different. It was, here's a starving person, let's try and feed them. And it was a very basic impulse, and it was shared by not just the pop pantheon, but the population in general. Yeah. And what happened was they raised I think about £10 million initially from the record, and they started to get together food, medicines, tents for shelter, and various other things, and sent them out to Ethiopia. The press pestered Geldof to go out and said, you must go out and see what's happening there, and we can get some good stories and photos of you with the starving kids. And Bob said, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be pictured as the white man with the starving black kids. And he wouldn't go at first, but he was persuaded by the man who became Band-Aid's lawyer, music industry lawyer, John Kennedy. He said, you've got to go, Bob, because people will, you've promised that every penny raised will go. There'll be no diversion of funds or anything, every penny. So you've got to go and make sure that's happening. Very reluctantly, Bob went out. And what he found there was that the food that Band-Aid was providing was getting stuck in the ports, partly because of the political situation in Ethiopia, which was a Marxist regime. It was on the other side in the Cold War, which is why Western countries are a bit suspicious of it and a bit reluctant and hesitant to help. There was a problem in Ethiopia, but they were also sending grain in through Sudan, so it could get behind the rebel lines, because there was a civil war in Ethiopia, and most of the people who were starving were on the wrong side of the battle lines, and the only way to get food into them was to smuggle it through Sudan. But in Sudan, the port was controlled, rather the lorry transport system was controlled by a cartel of people who just kept putting the prices up whenever they saw another aid convoy come in. They think, oh, right, well, we'll make a bit of money out of that. So Geldof came back from Ethiopia filled with the idea that what they had done wasn't enough. And so he then hit upon the idea of turning the record into a concert. Now, the American pop stars had done their own record. They rung him up.
Yeah.
And there's a very funny story in the book about how he's sitting at home one day and he gets a phone call and he says, is that Bob Geldof? And he says, it's Harry. And Harry Belafonte. And I've got Michael here. Hi, Michael. Hi, Bob. It's and Bob's gobsmacked because he's got Michael Jackson and Harry Belafonte, who's his great hero, because people might not know, but Harry Belafonte didn't just sing calypso songs. He was a great campaigner. He was a friend of Martin Luther King's, and he'd organized all the civil rights marches, and he was one of Bob's heroes. And here were these two, people who'd been in posters on his bedroom wall, ringing him up and saying, hi, Bob. And the upshot was that they did their own record. They invited him over for the recording, and he told them what the situation was like, having just returned from Ethiopia. So he got his own record, the UK record, and now this American one, which is called We Are the World. And he thought, well, if I can bring these two together and we could have a concert. And then he thought, well, we could have two concerts, one on that side of the Atlantic and one on this side of the Atlantic. We can raise the money to smash this cartel of lorry owners and a lot more. Right. And by this point, he found out the famine was spreading to Sudan and other places. And he thought, well, we'll raise the money not just for Ethiopia, like Band-Aid, but for the whole of Africa, or the whole of the famine hit region of Africa. So he decided to do a concert. And that was the origin of the Live Aid concert, which in its day, it was the biggest event in human history. Nobody had ever got 2 million people together as a television audience, plus another billion on the radio. So there were like 3 billion people. It was like half the planet watched this thing. So it was a huge event in the kind of psyche of the world. And Live Aid, the book's full of stories about the goings on backstage with the pop stars and everything. But to go straight to your point, what happened after Live Aid was Bob contacted me and said, will you come and help me spend the money? And we went across Africa from Mali, we went to Timbuktu in the east, and then right across the Sahel to Ethiopia. And we found that there were a load of common problems, and a lot of them didn't stem just from drought and famine. They stemmed from things like the debt that all these countries owed to Western banks, and the interest on it was piling up, week by week by week, so that it'd become unpayable. So and then there were aid policies, and was aid being spent on the right things? No, a lot of aid was being spent by the British government saying to African countries, you can spend this money on services provided by British firms. So it was kind of benefiting Britain as much as it was benefiting Africa. And then we discovered that a lot of the problems with trade. Africa would produce raw materials, send them to Europe. Europe would put a tariff on them, a kind of tax, and then Europe would send stuff back and demand that there was no tariff or tax on their stuff. So the whole trading system was out of balance. So we hit upon this new thing that we discovered: aid, trade, and debt became the slogan, and those are the things that needed fixing. And so then after Live 8, this is jumping ahead, you might want to go back, but after Live 8, Bob, together with Bono, went on this journey, and we called it From Charity to Justice. I'd written a previous book called Bad Samaritans, the opposite of Good Samaritans. Bad Samaritans, first world ethics and third world debt. And I'd come up with this notion that we needed to move from charity to justice, from aid, from fundraising to politics. And Bob and Bono went on that journey through movements like Drop the Debt, Jubilee 2000, and later Make Poverty History, to the point where they were talking to world leaders at summits of the G8, the group of 8 most powerful countries in the world, and lobbying them for specific political change. So this whole journey went on, and really continues up to this day in different ways. And so the book is full of stories about the shenanigans of pop stars, but it's also full of background politics. And I had access to, private Downing Street diaries and that kind of thing, and talked to the really top people in Downing Street and elsewhere, in the Foreign Office, the Treasury. And so the book is like an amalgam of pop and politics.
Mint is still $15 a month for premium wireless. And if you haven't made the switch yet, here are 15 reasons why you should. 1, it's $15 a month. 2, seriously, it's $15 a month. 3, no big contrast. 4, I use it. 5, my mom uses it. Are you playing me off? That's what's happening, right? Okay, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
If you're navigating anxiety, depression, relationship challenges, postpartum struggles, or something else, you deserve care that meets you where you are. Grow Therapy is designed to help you find a therapist who fits your needs and supports the way you want to feel. They connect you with thousands of independent, licensed therapists across the U.S., offering both virtual and in-person sessions. You can search by insurance, provider specialty, treatment methods, and more to find a therapist who works for you. Whatever challenges you're facing, Grow Therapy is here to help. Sessions average about $21 with insurance, and some pay as little as $0 depending on their plan. Visit growtherapy.com/ACAST today to get started. That's growtherapy.com/ACAST. growtherapy.com/ACAST. Availability and coverage vary by state and insurance plan.
If your eyes are the windows to your soul, and your glasses are the windows to your eyes, then it's pretty important to find your perfect frames. That's why at Warby Parker, we've made shopping for eyewear as easy and fun as can be. Peruse endless styles in our stores, or use our app to virtually try on frames and get personalized recommendations. To find your next favorite pair of glasses, sunglasses, or contact lenses, or to locate your nearest Warby Parker store, head over to warbyparker.com. That's warbyparker.com.
I think it's great that we can return to this. And I think one of the, as I said, one of the problems at the time when there is a famine and people have the money to buy a record, the kind of the simple solution at the time is, donate a bit of money, buy a record, and hopefully things will improve. But it's because the wider kind of context is often obscured from most people, and it's not their fault. It's difficult right now if you look at any given situation in the world where there's a terrible suffering. It's difficult to kind of look into that context. But I think placing the story of Band-Aid and Live Aid, and then Live 8 into this bigger context of really kind of neo-colonialism through debt which is, surely the most kind of one of the biggest drivers of poverty in Africa. I think that's really, really important. The question of debt often it gets raised as this sort of slightly kind of moral question. And I was reading David Graeber's amazing book on debt, the first 5,000 years, in which he said, well, is it really? He was talking to an economist who was saying, well, shouldn't we all pay back our debts? And he pointed out that when Madagascar was forced to pay back an IMF loan, 20,000 children died of malaria. And so debt itself...
There's a famous line from the leader of Tanzania, and he said, must we starve our children to pay our debts?
Yeah. I mean, how successful so far has Bob Geldof been in convincing Western leaders and Western banks to cancel debt?
Very successful. But let me go back a bit. What you just referred to is what bankers call moral hazard. And it's the idea if people don't pay their debts, then the whole kind of basis of trust on banking and so forth will collapse. Well, that's true to a point, but there's also a concept in banking called odious debt. And an odious debt is a debt that's incurred by a government without the consent of the people, which might not have been used to benefit the population. And the lenders, the banks, were aware of that fact, or should have been aware of that fact. And what happened, the way this debt came about was there was an oil crisis in the 70s. And the oil-producing countries came together called OPEC, and they got together. That was another cartel. They put the prices up. The West, there was a financial crisis. The West, through the 70s and the 80s, a couple of these, the West began to suffer from this, put prices up. The money from all the everybody was paying went to the Arab nations. They put it in Western banks. Now, a banker, if he's got a load of money put into his bank and the person who's put it in is expecting interest, the only way he can make any money to pay the interest is to lend it to somebody. So the banks went out and persuaded people in Africa and other places that they should borrow this money, and the rates at which they charged it were so low that people thought, oh yeah, that's great, we'll have all this money. It's cheap, it's almost free. And it was given particularly to people who are on what we might call our side in the Cold War.
Yeah.
So places like Ethiopia didn't get that much because they were on the side of the Soviet Union.
No.
And people forget about the Cold War. It was a massive, we think nowadays where there are increases in defense spending and so forth. But in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan was introducing the Star Wars missile system, and it was being ramped up, the whole nuclear weapons thing on both sides. And the lending money to countries who were favorable to the West seemed like a good idea. And then when interest rates shot up, reasons we needn't go into, these people were told that they had to repay. And if you look at a country like Nigeria, it repaid far more than it actually borrowed. So, like the president of Nigeria, Obasanjo, once wrote a letter setting out the figures, and he said, we borrowed $5 billion from Western creditors in 1978. Since then, we've paid back 16 billion. That's 3 times as much as they borrowed, and they still owed 31 billion because of the building up of compound interest. So that gives you an idea of how this debt was not just, well, it was unfair because they'd paid back so much, but it was unjust and iniquitous because the only way they could pay it was by cutting their health and education budgets. So kids weren't getting treated for their illnesses, and they weren't going to school in order to give who formed this movement called Drop the Debt, or Jubilee 2000, which again was out of my book from Bad Samaritans from 1990. And it was that idea that in the Bible, the Old Testament, there's this notion of Jubilee, which means that every 7 years you have to forgive certain debts. And every 7 years, every a Sabbath of Sabbaths, they call it, every 50 years, you had to have a kind of universal forgiveness. So it was applied by a movement which came to be called Jubilee 2000 to say, on the millennium 2000, let's have a Jubilee where all these debts are wiped away. And to this is a long way of explaining the background, but to go back to your question, Geldof persuaded, first of all, Bono persuaded Clinton to write off 100% of the debts that were owed to America. At the Gleneagles G8, as a result of Make Poverty History, Live 8 and all the campaigning, there were billions of these debts wiped away, thanks to the energies of Gordon Brown, who corralled all the other finance ministers. And then subsequently, Geldof and Bono spent the next 5 years going to every international meeting they could get into of world leaders and saying, right, you promised this, but you haven't delivered it yet on that or this point or that point. And they you've written a check, now give us the money. And they kept on for years doing that. And they were pretty successful on getting the aid promises delivered, not by 2010, which is when they were promised, but by about 2014, 2017, it was the aid had reached the right level. But on the Gleneagles meeting in 2005, the debts were wiped away. So on debt, when Geldof was asked what's the result of all this, he said, well, 10 out of 10 on debt. 8 out of 10 on aid.
He copped a lot of flack at the time. There were it's
Mint is still $15 a month for premium wireless. And if you haven't made the switch yet, here are 15 reasons why you should. 1, it's $15 a month. 2, seriously, it's $15 a month. 3, no big contracts. 4, I use it. 5, my mom uses it. Are you playing me off? That's what's happening, right? Okay, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Taking care of your eyes shouldn't be a hassle. That's why Warby Parker is a one-stop shop for all your vision needs. Our prescription glasses and sunglasses are expertly crafted and unexpectedly affordable. Stop by a nearby store or use our app to virtually try on frames and get personalized recommendations. Did we mention we offer eye exams and take vision insurance too? For everything you need to see, head to your nearest Warby Parker store or visit warbyparker.com today. That's warbyparker.com.
Depending on who you ask, that was either, a kind of a valid statement by him or hugely kind of premature.
It certainly wasn't premature on debt. It might have been premature on aid. But basically, I had a very interesting conversation with Richard Curtis, the man who runs Comic Relief, and that's, raised billions from every year, Red Nose Day, and, persuading your teacher to shave his beard off or paint his head red or whatever. Again, that's another product of the Live Aid movement. It enabled a lot of ordinary people, ordinary school kids and so forth, to feel that there was something they could do to address these global problems. Richard Curtis has got a very interesting theory about the psychology of this. He says that he and Geldof and Bono and various others, including some in the aid agency world, have a view that if you can ask for something and you get certainly a big percentage of it done, the thing to do is to say to the politicians, great, that's fantastic, you've done really well there. Oh, and by the way, there's one other thing you could do. But the general psychology in the aid agency world, according to the Curtis theory, and I think this is right, is the opposite. Is there's always more you could ask for, and the way to get more is to attack the politicians for not having done enough.
Yeah.
So it's like, the Geldof mode is a glass half full, and the aid agency mode is a glass half empty. So when the results of the Gleneagles summit came out, some of the aid agencies said it was a disaster for the world's poor, whereas Kofi Annan, who's an African and became head of the UN, he said it was the greatest summit ever for Africa. So as you rightly pointed out, it depended entirely on what your perspective was, but also it depended on your kind of psychological temperament. Yeah. Were you a pessimist or a negative, an optimist? Were you positive or negative? And so that's why you get something like all the African leaders thought Gleneagles was great. Most of the mainstream aid agencies did or had mixed views about it. And the more radical aid agencies did this kind of like, oh, whoa, it's a disaster for the world's poor. So that explains why you can have two such disparate verdicts on something. And often you need to dig deep into the facts and find out, what was the situation before, what was the situation after, and then make a sensible judgment, a pragmatic judgment on whether it's a good or a bad thing on balance.
And I get a sense with your book, and I guess this is the final kind of thing to kind of explore, that there is this kind of, from 1985 to 2025, there has been this sea change in mentality. At first around, the connectedness that people have to the world's problems, the sense that ordinary people can contribute to, ordinary people, in wealthy first world countries, I think that's the focus, can contribute to doing something, but also that kind of activism matters and activism changes things. Is that a kind of like the theme of the book?
Yes, it's one of the things of the book, and it's definitely the case that I feel that through this movement, which I've been involved with for 40 years, so this is me like telling my story. I feel that we did make a difference. Aid was Live Aid raised millions. Live Aid got billions. Millions of people who would have been dead now are alive now because of this movement. Yes, you can always do more, but the thing itself was massive, and it was massive in more ways than one. It wasn't just me and Bob and the activists and the aid agencies and the Make Poverty History campaign, although that was big. There were 38 million people signed the Make Poverty History petition, the Live Aid petition, which is the biggest petition the world had ever seen. And these Live Aid events, they were the biggest global gathering the world had ever seen in human history. These are massive things, but they also were massive in the psychological effect that they had on a generation. Gordon Brown said that Live Aid was the single most important event in the life of two generations. And what you got there was this sense of empowerment and this kicking against the sense of despair and, oh, the world's a terrible place, there's nothing we can do about it. And so I see the psychological and kind of spiritual template that Live Aid set out as being one which could be picked up in the future. Now, people look at the present world and they say, look, aid's been slashed everywhere. Donald Trump's cut the aid budget by 83%. There's wars in Ukraine and Gaza. Defense spending's up in the rich world. There's a new nativism of populism abroad, America first. Every country's got a bit of America first now. And Trump's tariffs, they're the antithesis of fair trade. You think, it couldn't happen now, could it? But then, look back to when Geldof did this. It was the height of the Cold War. The United States and Soviet Russia were so the Soviet Union were fighting proxy wars in places like Ethiopia and in Latin America. Ronald Reagan had cranked up spending with the Star Wars thing. There was all this rhetoric about the evil empire, which was a polarizing thing in the world. The world was a struggle between freedom and tyranny. And we live in a world where polarization is common. Margaret Thatcher just waged war abroad on Argentina and at home with the miners. It was the bitterest industrial dispute in British industrial history. And the whole economic consensus, post-war consensus on how the world should run was breaking apart. You've got Thatcherism and Reaganomics, so with the new monetarism, cutting funding for education, housing, welfare for the poor, and slashing taxes for the wealthy. So you've got rich yuppies in London and unemployed people in the northeast where the old coal mines and the old manufacturing industries were in decline. And the gap between the rich and the poor was increasing, and there was this new ethic of individualism, rather like we've got this new ethic of native populism. And greed was good. There was no such thing as society, and that was the hostile world into which Geldof launched this new plea for for generosity and compassion. And what he did was reflected in the hearts of millions of people who felt they'd done their part in bringing about change. So, all it needs is a new Geldof. It won't be a rock star. It won't be the analog world of rock music. It'll be something digital. Who knows? It might be about climate. Could be about, who knows? I'm old. Geldof's old, but the young people will work out what it is. And here is this. What this book sets out is a template of this, the way ordinary people can make change outside the normal political process. So for me, this is a book about now, not just a book about then. And it's something I feel optimistic about, not pessimistic.
100%. I agree. It takes an immense amount to batter the humanity out of people. It's always there. Wherever you look, it's always there. And I absolutely agree that the solutions very often lie outside the normal channels of political discourse with ordinary people. But there we must finish, Paul. Very quickly, we've got about 2 minutes left. Let's have a nano plug for the book. So it is Live Aid, the definitive 40-year story from pop and poverty to politics and power. Available as we speak, or released?
Yeah, it came out yesterday, November the 6th. So whatever this goes out, it's out now. It's out. Okay. Yeah.
I will put a link
in all good bookshops and also some dodgy ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we always say in the podcast, support your local bookshop, support your indie retailer. Don't go and buy it from a big online retailer, of whom we shall say no more for legal reasons. And if you can't get it from your local bookshop, go directly to the publisher, and I'll put the links below.
Very good.
Thank you so much, Paul. It was lovely to chat. And I do hope that we get to talk again about all of these matters.
Yeah, it's been very interesting. And it's been a different kind of conversation than I've had in lots of radio interviews. So I'm grateful to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Speak to you soon.
Okay. See you. Bye.
If your eyes are the windows to your soul, and your glasses are the windows to your eyes, then it's pretty important to find your perfect frames. That's why at Warby Parker, we've made shopping for eyewear as easy and fun as can be. Peruse endless styles in our stores, or use our app to virtually try on frames and get personalized recommendations. To find your next favorite pair of glasses, sunglasses, or contact lenses, or to locate your nearest Warby Parker store, head over to warbyparker.com. That's warbyparker.com.
The best gifts of the holiday season make your loved ones glow, inside and out. From stocking stuffers to festive favorites, Osea's Undaria Algae Body Butter is a surefire hit for everyone on your list, even the hardest to please. This rich, transformative formula is powered by whipped shea butter and ceramides, delivering up to 72 hours of hydration while visibly improving skin crepiness and firming the look of skin over time. It leaves your skin feeling soft, smooth, and deeply nourished, with scents of grapefruit, lime, and cypress, combined with the sweet notes of mango mandarin. Osea's Undaria Algae Body Butter is so luxurious, you'll want to grab one for yourself. But hurry before this sells out. Give the gift of firm, hydrated skin this holiday season with clean, clinically tested skincare from Osea. And right now, we have a special discount just for our listeners. Get 10% off your first order site-wide with code OSEAGLOW at OSEAMalibu.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Explaining History. This podcast is an independent production, and it's listener support that keeps these conversations going week after week. If you find value in the show and want to help cover the costs of research and production, please consider making a contribution. You can join our community on Patreon or make a one-off donation. Just follow the links in the show notes for this episode. Every bit of support is truly appreciated. Thanks again for listening.